It's not no easier. I still want to know why. I still like to know who and their reasoning. I still believe in my mind and in my heart that somebody had to solve something. They just scared to come forward. But somebody knows something.
Happy Friday and welcome to BrainScratch. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for joining me here today. One thing that I've learned through doing this show is that we're always looking to understand the crazy events we discuss here. To take occurrences that seem too terrible or random to be true and try to make some sense out of them. Understand who committed them and why. And that helps us all feel safer in our own lives. But occasionally you come across a case where the randomness makes the why seem impossible to understand. And if you can't understand the why, can you ever figure out the who? I personally think you can. I believe that even in occurrences of that nature, people talk, and someone out there might have the right information to bring justice to a family that's been waiting 7 years for it. To bring answers to a husband that lost his wife. And to bring answers to a daughter that was only 11 months old at the time her mother was killed and was right there when it happened. North Little Rock is a city in Pulaski County, Arkansas, United States, across the Arkansas River from the Little Rock, Arkansas that most of us are familiar with. It's located in the central part of the state with around 65,000 residents, is approximately 47 square miles in size, and is the hometown of actress Mary Steenburgen, a guitarist that plays with Green Day and a former bassist of Paramore. According to website areavibes.com, North Little Rock has some challenges when it comes to crime, with violent crime being 95% higher than the national average. Back in 2008, across the Arkansas River in Little Rock, 26-year-old Samantha Cass worked as a server at a restaurant that overlooked the river called Cajun's Wharf. It was there she met Eric Olson, another employee of the restaurant that started on the same day as Samantha, and a quick friendship would start. The two transferred together to a sister restaurant called Copper Grill, where Samantha continued working as a server and Eric was the bar manager. The friendship became more serious, and soon there was an engagement and eventually a wedding. Samantha completed a degree at the University of Arkansas Little Rock and, while still working at the restaurant, also did some part-time work as an accountant, laying the path for a career change. Life had some challenges for the couple, but nothing like what would happen just a few years later. It was Wednesday, August 14th, 2013, exactly 7 years ago today. It was a warm early evening, just after 7 p.m., but the sun wouldn't go down for about another hour. Eric was at work at the Copper Grill. Samantha was driving in her dark blue Mazda 3 hatchback with her window cracked down about 6 inches to let some fresh air blow in. Her family isn't exactly sure where she was headed to, possibly to pick up a birthday present for an upcoming party. She was traveling on McCain Boulevard, one of the main roads in town that will take you to the local mall, as well as numerous restaurants and stores. She was about a half-mile away from her home. In the car with her was her 11-month-old daughter, Lene, a child that a lot of people would refer to as a miracle baby for at least two big reasons. Quote, all she ever wanted was to be a mom, and she finally got it. Lene was the happiest, sweetest little baby. Samantha's sister April Welshans told ArkansasOnline.com. Samantha and Eric had tried having children several times, and unfortunately, they went through many miscarriages. They didn't give up and finally had a pregnancy that would go full term and help complete their family. On September 16th, 2012, little Lene came into the world. As Samantha continued eastbound on McCain, she came to JFK Boulevard. This was one of the busiest intersections in North Little Rock, a crossing of two of the main thoroughfares in the area. You would think this would be a terrible place to commit a crime, but someone didn't think so. A maroon Ford F-150 truck was coming the opposite direction on McCain. Samantha's light was green and she entered the intersection. Witnesses say that when the truck passed Samantha's car, a gun came out of the window and fired several shots. The number is still in question. Somewhere between 3 and 6 shots were fired, but all it took was one. Samantha was hit. The bullet entered through the 6-inch gap in her cracked window. Law enforcement won't release the details of where she was struck, but she was immediately incapacitated, and considering the trajectory of the bullet clearing the door frame and not touching the glass just 6 inches below it, I don't think it's too hard to determine where she was hit. The car rolled forward and came to a stop in front of a nearby Starbucks. The second miracle in Lene's short life came with a terrible price. Thankfully, Samantha had put Lene in a rear-facing baby seat in the back of the car. Samantha was rushed to the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences Medical Center. Her father, Stan Duche, was the first person in the family to hear something bad had happened to Samantha. He was contacted by someone working in the emergency room who would only tell him that he had to come as soon as he could. He was getting ready to leave for work and had seen a news report about the shooting at the intersection, but he didn't connect it with his daughter. He was thinking maybe a car accident. Quote, "She had a couple of accidents before, and on the way to the hospital, I was thinking, I'm going to have to chastise this girl pretty harshly about her driving. But then they came in and were speaking to us. There was like 5 or 6 people in there, the medical team that had worked on her. And when one of them said she had been shot, my reaction was, shot? I'm thinking, how did she get shot? Then they said she didn't make it. I just kind of lost it." James Dancy was a patrol supervisor for the North Little Rock Police Department and was surprised about getting a call on a shooting so early on a Wednesday evening. He was on the scene within 4 minutes and told Arkansas Online, "There's times I wish my eyes could unsee, my heart could unfeel what we experienced there that day." Thankfully, with this being a pretty busy area, there were witnesses, and they did notice some very interesting details. Several noted seeing a large toolbox in the back of the truck, but some of them said it was orange, and others insisted it was silver. Considering that it was getting close to the sun coming down, I'm wondering if orange hues in the sky were being picked up by the reflection on the silver toolbox and creating the variation in the witness statements. The witness statements did align on saying that the driver was male, but there was more variation in terms of what race the assailant was. Articles over the years have also been releasing some inconsistent details about the truck in terms of the year and the model in particular. Some say a 2004 to 2008 F-150 Super Cab. Other reports are stating that it was a 2007 to 2010 F-150 that was red or maroon. And one article even says it was a 4-door, which would actually be a crew cab model. But the early reports seem to key in on the year 2008. A spokesman for the police department stated that no shell casings were found. Considering that witnesses say the gun was pointed out the window, I would assume this could mean that a revolver was possibly used, the casings staying in the chamber until it was unloaded. But in a bizarre twist, police used metal detectors to try to locate any additional slugs, or at least fragments of them, and apparently they couldn't find any. With witnesses hearing anywhere between 3 to 6 shots, what are the chances of that? It almost has me wondering if the gunshots coming from the truck is actually a bad assumption by the eyewitnesses, but some say that they actually saw the gun. We also don't know any details about what slugs were recovered from Samantha or her car. Perhaps all of the bullets were accounted for, but then why were they looking for more with a metal detector? I don't know. I just can't shake a weird feeling about all this because there's another factor that either supports that the truck might have not been involved, or it demonstrates that if it is, the person driving might even be colder than we already think. When I started looking into this case, the first thing I did was look for potential cameras in the area. And at an intersection like this, you have plenty of cameras. You've got businesses on each corner, with one being a bank. Certainly there are going to be some cameras there. And you basically have businesses continuing in all directions if the vehicle stays on either JFK or McCain. Thankfully, the police were thinking along the same lines and started collecting CCTV footage. And what they noticed makes this event even more mind-blowing. The maroon truck passes Samantha's car and just keeps driving like nothing happened. No acceleration, no turning off into the easily accessible neighborhoods that have a much lower chance of cameras tracking them. He just continues on McCain until he gets to Camp Robinson Road, a little less than a mile from where the shooting took place. He makes a left, and they are able to find footage tracking him until the 3500 block of Camp Robinson Road, which looks like it's heading to a convergence of several highways. Based on the direction he's been traveling, it's easy to assume that he's either going to continue south or maybe jump on one of those highways and head west from there, but there are no further CCTV captures of the vehicle. None of the CCTV footage could give investigators a license plate number. And I also haven't seen any insights on the possible state that the plate is from, which we've seen analyzed before in other cases. Unfortunately, I'm not really finding any photos or footage that we can analyze for ourselves here. Also unfortunate is that maroon F-150s are literally all over the country. The police do start reviewing records trying to track down the correct one, but it's literally a needle in a haystack. And 7 years later, what are the odds that this person still has the truck, or that it's even the same color? Dancy would eventually become a detective, and when he did, he took the opportunity to review Samantha's case. He has said that he feels like a failure with this case hanging over him, and his team has tried numerous approaches and even untested techniques in an effort to find justice. They still get tips called in, and each one is followed up. Quote, "When you see the bodies and those lifeless eyes, you wonder why anybody feels they have the right to do that to somebody," he stated. And he raises one of the most difficult things to understand about this case. Why would someone kill a 31-year-old wife and new mother? Looking at the details we've covered so far, does it even make sense to think that this was a targeted attack? Or was this purely done at random? If this was a planned event, the killer would have to be a genius in terms of figuring out the timing of her being on that particular stretch of road at that particular time and coordinating his travel from the opposite direction to give him a window of maybe a few seconds or even less to try to pull this off. Is it even feasible? Even if it was, would a genius of that nature pick a location with so many cameras and witnesses in the light of day to pull this off? It's amazing this case hasn't already been solved, just considering where it happened. And speaking of sunlight, the sun would have been at Samantha's back and getting lower for sunset, so he's potentially shooting with sunlight beaming towards his face. Does any of this make sense? I don't think it does. And that brings us to a terrifying answer. The killer might have not known Samantha at all. This might have been purely a case of wrong time, wrong place that ended her life. I mean, what's the motive here? This isn't a crime of opportunity. What's the opportunity unless you think that it's the act of the crime itself? Was this purely a thrill kill? Has this man done this before? Will he do it again? Sergeant Brian Diedrich, spokesman for the North Little Rock Police Department, told ArcTimes.com, "Everybody we've talked to said she didn't have any enemies. With one car going east, one car going west, the chances of somebody targeting her would seem slim. We're not ruling anything out, but it does appear to be a random act. We really need someone with knowledge to come forward." He firmly believes that the key to cracking this case is someone directly connected to the killer stepping forward and sharing their info with law enforcement. Now, in terms of my theory that maybe the truck wasn't involved, Sergeant Diedrich states that they are, quote, very confident that shots did come from the truck, based on the multiple witnesses. What that tells me is that despite all the businesses and potential cameras at that intersection, none of them actually had a clear image of the actual gunfire occurring. I mean, I'd even take muzzle flashes. We've got no frames of information that can definitively tell the police, yes, the shots happened from that vehicle. He also seems to share the weight of this case that Sergeant Dancy spoke about. What bothers me is that there's a family out there that hasn't found any closure. There's a baby involved that was in the vehicle when this happened. We've worked a lot of homicides, and they all bother you anytime we have a loss of life. But when you have an infant involved and a homicide for no apparent reason, you take it home with you. Samantha's sister, April, shared this. My sister really was the rock in our family. Everybody called Sissy. Everybody. Bad day? We just call Sissy. Text Sissy. It's just what you did. April's brother, Jeremy, called her at home over 300 miles away from North Little Rock. Sissy's dead, he told her. April said, I heard my mother's screams. The reality hit. My life shattered. My heart physically hurt. I screamed out loud and lost all control. I collected myself, put on shoes, grabbed my keys, and drove all the way home. I don't know how a family is expected to cope and move on and accept and forgive if there isn't any closure on it. 3 years after the tragedy, Eric wrote a letter to local channel TVH 11 expressing what he's been facing in all of this. I feel that anything that can remind the public of this horrific tragedy, get them talking, and calling in information to the NLRPD is a good thing and may one day bring closure to this cold case and to my family. I must add, though, that I am disappointed and saddened that the case remains cold. Mostly, I'm saddened that my lovely wife was gunned down in broad daylight and no one saw anything substantial enough to lead to an arrest. To those that were there at the intersection of McCain and JFK that day, I must ask how a woman could be murdered right in front of them and they see nothing. More importantly, perhaps, I would like to say to anyone who knows who murdered Samantha, how can you sleep at night? Or even look in the mirror and withhold the perpetrator's name? This perpetrator, a murderer of an innocent nursing mother to an 11-month-old infant, has done so much more damage than they could imagine. Damage far beyond the grief carried by Samantha's family, a widowed husband, a motherless little girl, or Samantha's own mother who must live without living her child. Samantha's murderer blew lives apart to the point of being unrecognizable and nearly unlivable. I found myself a single father, doing everything I could to cope with grief and try to reassemble the pieces of my world into something that was at least manageable. Life in Arkansas became too unbearable for me and my family. That is, my mother and my brother, the only two people who stood in the gap for me and truly helped. So we gave up and left everything we had that was valuable to us. We gave up our homes, which we loved, our jobs and careers, which were fruitful to us, just so we could find a new, hopefully more peaceful setting where we could move on from all the pain and grief and long hours of single parenthood and be able to raise my little girl in a safe and thriving environment. And so far, it seems to be working. It is still hard, as parenthood often is, but our daughter, who turns 4 next month, would make her mother proud. She is learning to ride horses, loves Sunday school, and takes ballet. We do talk about her mommy from time to time. She knows that she's in heaven and has a few photos of her. She is truly a sweet, darling child, and we will do anything to protect her, though one day I know that I will have to tell her what happened to her mother, and the heartbreak that she will feel breaks my own heart. No child should ever experience that. But we do the best we can, give her all the joy we can, and keep her in Christ, and surely she will be blessed. For the good people of the NLRPD, I pray that a real lead will come to them swiftly, that their diligent work over the past 3 years will come to fruition, and we will have justice. 4 years after the shooting, Captain Brian Scott would voice his frustrations. Samantha Olson was totally innocent. She was just driving down the road, just like anybody else could be driving down the road. He states that re-interviewing witnesses hasn't helped, tracking down over 1,000 F-150s hasn't helped, but Captain Scott and Sergeant Dancy are confident that the case will be solved someday. Somebody's going to talk, and when that day comes, we'll have our answers, Scott said. I hope I live to see it, Dancy replied. In June of 2020, Sergeant James Dancy celebrated 35 years with the North Little Rock Police Department and currently serves as the supervisor of the Major Crimes Homicide Unit of the Investigations Division. 2 years ago, April sent some comments in a passionate letter to the media. 5 years with no answers has certainly taken its toll on her and the family. Quote, I've had to watch my mother, my brother, and my daughter go through countless days of agony and pain from the loss of this beautiful woman that we loved so much. I've seen firsthand what a stranger's violence rips from the life a family has. I've seen injustice and ignorance on behalf of the city's part. I've seen blind eyes on the behalf of the media, and I've seen prejudice on the side of the law. The coward that committed this heinous crime shattered lives for generations to come, ripped a family apart, and left us all questioning the why. And as the city continues its day-to-day, as cars pass that intersection minute by minute without even noticing the cross on the sidewalk, our family has to live day by day with the heartache. To the community, the media, the city, and the law enforcement, please remember our Sam. Work her case. Make it public and often. Step up if you know or remember anything. As another year passes, I pray that my sister hears us all with the love that we have for her. She is not forgotten, she is dearly missed, and she will always be loved. April Welshons. The wooden cross that April mentioned used to stand on its own as a memorial to Samantha. Over the years, much like this family, it needed more support, and it was moved and attached to a local road sign, a small weathered teddy bear trying to hold the memory of what happened there 7 years ago. Samantha's mother says she still talks to her because she knows she's listening. My daughter was loved by everyone who knew her. She had no enemies. She was my brightest ray of sunshine, and another ray for me was the fact that my granddaughter didn't catch one of those bullets. Samantha always had an affection for animals, especially for any that might need to be rescued. She and her husband had 3 dogs, 2 cats, and an aquarium as wide as one of those big TVs, and it was full of fish. My daughter was a wonderful, giving, loving kind of person who never met a stranger. She enjoyed being a friend to others. I couldn't help but remember what Samantha had done for me several years ago when I had cancer. She let everything go and stayed with me during my treatments. I told her, baby, you've got your own life. You shouldn't have to feel like you have to be here to take care of me all the time. But she wouldn't hear of leaving me. Samantha had a smile that could light up a room. It was so bright and powerful that I could hear her smile over the phone. I already miss that smile. I always will, but I'll always remember it too. Anyone with tips on this case, please call the North Little Rock Investigations Unit at 501-680-8439. A $15,000 reward may be available, and outside of the reward, it would just be the right thing to do for this family, but also for yourself. Now, this story obviously touched many people, including some really good journalists that covered it. I just wanted to say thank you to David Kuhn at ArcTimes.com and Ginny Monk at ArkansasOnline.com for their amazing, heartfelt coverage of this tragedy. Thank you also to THV11 for their continued coverage over the years. And April, I want you to know that people that don't even live in Arkansas are looking at that teddy bear and wooden cross on Google Maps today, and learning the story of your amazing sister. So what do you think, Brain Scratchers? People online are discussing a possible mistaken identity. Did the shooter think that someone else was in that car? Other theories I'm seeing include gang initiation, which I actually considered early on as well, but with the description of how the car left the scene, I'm just not certain if that explanation really fits. It still bothers me with just thinking of a car doing something like that and then just casually goes driving off. And I'm still struggling with that. There's still a piece of me that wants to think this can't be accurate. Like, this doesn't make sense. Is it someone that is just really that madly brilliant that they're going to pull off a murder like that, and maybe they don't want to be picked up by cameras racing down the street, so they're just going to try to act cool the whole way through? I can't imagine that that's what's going on here. So I'm really struggling with that angle. Other things that are being discussed, possibly some form of road rage, but why would you be upset about a car that's coming the opposite direction that you're likely to only see for a matter of seconds? Is there a chance that we're looking in the wrong direction with the truck and that it's not involved at all? Police aren't saying they're absolutely positive that those shots came from it. I'm curious to see your thoughts, and as always, I ask that we please remain respectful to the families, as they're likely to see your discussion, and possibly someday, so might Lene. My heart goes out to the family and friends of Samantha. I ask that you please help me raise exposure to this case by sharing this video with any friends or family you have in Arkansas, and let's see if that tip that this family has been waiting 7 years for finally gets called in. Someday soon, I hope I can give you an update on how justice arrives for Samantha. Before I end today's video, I'd like to thank several supporters through PayPal. Thank you, Rita Maria Wanninger, Mark Witt, Hillary Green, and Brandy Fry. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for PayPal, sign up for Patreon, or buy merchandise. All of it helps keep me here doing what I'm absolutely moved to do, helping these families in these terrible situations, and always with limited commercials, and sometimes we have to go completely without ads. So thank you for considering supporting the channel. I'll be back with a brand new episode of Case Cracked on Monday, right here on the Lord and Arts channel.